hello, Renee. We're back, and it's
We're,
the end of the year.
we're back. Can you believe we've made another year? This is
I,
insane. Here we
I
are,
know.
the end
Who'd
of
have
the year.
thought? Who'd have thought we made it another year?
Who'd have thought? I know. I gave you and Brent the business 2 years ago, and I was like, well, let's hope that doesn't die.
And we've
Here
gotten
we
into a lot
are.
of trouble. And we've gotten in a lot of trouble since then. And we're
I know,
working
and
on
I'm
more
really excited
trouble.
to talk about it today. I'm excited.
Oh,
So, Happy New Year, everybody. We're headed right into 2026. Can you believe that? That seems like I'm old. We were born in the 1900s. I'm
I
feeling it
know.
today.
I know.
But
I know.
anyway, so today, everybody, what we're going to do is we're going to do a year in review. Jason was everywhere in 2025, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some of the hero programs, those programs that are up and coming, new, exciting that we saw across the country. And then we're going to see some themes of what's the same in behavioral health across the country. There's some things that are pretty consistent that everybody's working on. We're going to talk about those. And then we're going to tell you some stories about traveling across the world like we did this year, and some of the challenges and some of the funny things that we landed into. So we got a lot of good stuff ahead today. So Jason, start us off. We're like 13 states you were in this year, at least.
At least. I mean, if we count our home state, and we did a lot of work here in our home state of Iowa this year, 14 states, I think, and I'm
Wow.
not entirely sure, but that's major conferences, statewide and national conferences that we actually spoke at across 14 states. We were as far north as Alaska, if you can't
Mm,
believe it. We traveled to Anchorage together, and as
mm-hmm,
far south as Texas.
mm-hmm.
That's pretty good, right? And personally I go to Puerto Rico every year. So, I mean, personally, I kind of made the very north to the very southern end of the United States this year.
Yeah. Well, and you've always been complaining that we were just stuck in the Midwest all that time and we couldn't
Eh,
get anywhere warmer. And this year we've actually made it warmer. You made it to
we have.
Arizona warmer, Texas warmer, Louisiana warmer. Now we
It's
didn't get all
true.
the states we wanted south, but at least you've gotten some, so you're getting some sunshine along the way. It's not
That's
all the
right.
Midwest. That's pretty
And
impressive.
we spanned what from Montana in the continental 48, we spanned Montana all the way over to Ohio this year. And so if we
Yep.
if we look at our 2 year, total, I think it's about 22 or 24 states. We're
That's
close to
insane.
half of the states that we've been to and spoken and learned about what's happening in those states, which I never dreamed when we started out doing this that we'd have those opportunities to go and speak, meet people, and learn about how systems work in almost 50% of the United States, Renee. It's just astounding.
I know. And we're going to have to put in the link in the show notes to our little tractor map
I
that we
know.
started mapping out where the towns and the cities we were in across the state because it started out literally right in the middle of just the Midwest. And we were kind of in Iowa and around surrounding states. And boy, those little tractors have just exploded. So it's a lot of fun to see the map because as it keeps up. And so we'll have to give a link here so people can go see exactly where we've been, which is pretty much everywhere. And if you're curious about what we're doing at these in these locations, it's speaking at the major rural mental health conferences with critical access hospitals. We have a partner that works with us on that and sends us to these places to educate people and to talk about some of the programming that works and it helps build systems in rural America. And so we've having a really good time doing that. We didn't even list any of the things that I've done on the side for parole because there's
Yeah.
additional states that I've done for those things. And so it's like we're just kind of all over the place. So now we're bringing in jail, prison, parole into this behavioral health mess because guess what? They're people and they too have behavioral health crises. And so we're going to add those folks into our mix and see where this takes us. It's going to be a lot of fun in 2026. I'm kind of excited to talk about that. So, Jason, talk to us about some of the what we call hero programs or some of the great things that we're seeing. Maybe, some of those promising practices, new programs that are out there. So tell us some of those and where you found them along the way.
Yeah, and part of the reason, and part of it tongue in cheek, we talk about hero programs because they're the one-off programs. They're the programs that are the way it should be, but they're the exception to the rule and not the
Yep.
rule. And so
Right.
oftentimes we go to conferences and it's good. It provides some hopefulness to the system, I suppose. But we go to conferences and they bring in the one program that's doing something innovative. And it may not be replicatable, but they bring it in and say, here's what you should do, but there may not be funding attached to it. It may have been a one time grant opportunity, and it may have worked really well, but oftentimes it ends when the grant funding ended. And so we often
Yes.
hear
Yeah.
about these great programs that aren't sustainable. And although they were a good idea, may not even really follow the structure of what the states put in place. And so you're like, oh, it's great, but nobody can replicate it. There's no funding to sustain it. And now we don't, it's probably going to go away.
And not even necessarily the policy, to your point, of it written down like how you did it to even be able to, or it's built around that one nurse practitioner who loved behavioral health in that community. And so, because other communities don't even have that one person, you can't even replicate it if you wanted to. And so, yes, they're called hero programs for a reason. But you did see some cool things while you were out and about. So, talk to them about some of the cool things you saw.
Well, I mean, some of the most innovative things we saw were drones that are delivering medications to critical access hospitals and clinics all across Missouri. And so, a drone manufacturer created a program, got some funding from the state, and now from a central hospital location that's much larger, they can send medications. We're seeing this also deployed in Texas. If you get a snake bite in some rural areas of Texas and you need that antivenom, in 3 hours, somebody can stick that antivenom in a drone, enter the coordinates on a central computer. Somebody walks out, drops that antidote in the drone, closes the lid, pushes a button, and it flies automatically on a pre programmed course to that rural health clinic or that critical access hospital where someone just has to walk out to that helipad, push the button, open up the cargo container, and take that back inside. That's pretty exciting, Renee, because that's using technology in a new way. And it makes me think, when we were in Austin, we saw Waymos and Teslas that were autonomous, taking people, we could jump in a Waymo, take us somewhere. There's no driver. How far are we from us dealing with the transportation issues we see of having autonomous vehicles pick people up and take them to their therapy appointment or take them to their medical appointment? Maybe that's the best way we solve some of our transportation issues today is really to embrace autonomous technology.
Yeah. Yep. One of the cool things I remember listening to, because I got to go to Alaska with you, was about mobile crisis that
Yeah.
works. And I know you said you had some stories about in Arizona too, but in Alaska, for those that don't know, that's just flat out frontier. And there's a whole lot of land that you can't even get to by air or by roads. And so they're just out there. And so there's those communities all around the coastline that, are not connected to other cities and places. And so it was really cool to hear how they weren't making excuses. They were doing four-wheelers or even airplanes if they had to get them to a major city. And so they have a way to make it happen, even though that they don't have even the infrastructure to make it happen. And so, canoe boats to get them from island to island when there's no streets. I mean, it was really fascinating. And so I know you said you heard some of that stuff in Arizona too, because there was more four-wheelers, I think, involved in Arizona, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's that some places you just can't get in a car. And so it was great when we could hear programs talk about not making excuses for why they can't do things. Here in our local state, we can't do telehealth because we don't have fast enough internet. And I'm like, really? When we were in Alaska, they said, well, we were at one hospital who told us their internet cables were severed and they had no
Mm,
internet and they just had they're like it didn't matter because a lot of their internet was consults. They use telehealth every day. They're like, we just got a Starlink, and we kept serving the people. There
that's right.
was no excuse for everything just stops because it can't stop in some of these areas. And so I think it's really exciting that to
Yep.
hear no excuses.
Yep. One of the other things I was excited to hear about in Louisiana was about they have a program for consultation for primary care and for docs working with children up to the age of 21. If they come in with behavioral health, that they can contact experts in behavioral health to get a consult right on the spot to help know what to do, which always seems to be one of the concerns we hear about for folks in primary care, folks that are in emergency departments, is that they don't have that consultation. Fun fact, I learned that it exists in our state as well, but
It
apparently
does.
not as promoted as well as in Indiana and Louisiana. Louisiana was very vocal about theirs, but it's a really cool idea. So I'm glad to hear that it's happening because that's the way you get the best use of your expert. And we talk about this with telehealth all the time, especially telepsychiatry. One of the greatest things that you've talked about since you used to use it a long time ago in your practice is the best thing is you could bring in the right type of psychiatrist for the specific issue. And so you could bring in that specialist via telehealth in a way that you couldn't get them to your small clinic in our state. And so it's a really great idea, especially for kids to be able to get a consult. So I'm glad to learn that it is in Iowa, but it was a really cool concept to hear down there too. Did you have any more hero programs you wanted to talk about?
No, I mean, I think that gives you a flavor of what we experienced this year of the things that, we see started, but it's really hard to expand these things and replicate them. And I think
Yeah,
that's the biggest barrier as we travel the country is how do you create replicatable programs that make sense in rural areas? So many
right.
things people try to implement and states try to force, and it's just never going to work in those rural areas. And so when are we going to learn we can't just go in and cookie cutter approach how we're going to be able to do these things? It
Yeah.
just doesn't make sense.
Right. So in all those states, we've got some themes that we want to break out, some things that you've seen across that's kind of consistent across the country. There's themes that come up in behavioral health. So these are the things where we know that these are systemic issues in behavioral health. It's not just a state, it's not a party, it's not a color state, it's not any of those things. It's systemic. So what are some of those themes that you're running into as you chat across the country?
Well, the first one is we've learned that no one actually talks to each other, even in the same community, even in a really small town. We've ended up
Yeah.
this year at more hospital conferences. So we end up more in healthcare than we do behavioral healthcare today because we go in and talk to healthcare and hospital CEOs about behavioral health. And they just look at us and go, really? That's a thing? Who do I talk to about that? I can tell you that so many times we've introduced the hospital CEO to the CEO of the local behavioral health center
Oh boy.
because they didn't know each other. And you'd be like, "Oh, that can't be true." It's true.
It is true. And you know if the CEOs don't know each other, the staff definitely don't. And so that's the really crazy part, especially if you're in an emergency department. We always talk about this. It's one thing if the CEOs are on a page with the community leaders, and it might be if your management, the next level might be on, but it's the third shift folks that come in the middle of the night who don't know who to call. If they don't know the who to call, that's where it falls apart. And that's where you end up in the newspaper and the police involved or whatever. You see it everywhere,
We
everywhere you've
literally
been.
sat 2 weeks ago, we literally sat with a doctor in an emergency department, and he told us that he often moonlights at a hospital, and he talked about moonlighting at a hospital in St. Louis, and he said the longest they boarded a patient one time was 6 months. Now, I
Wow.
don't know how exaggerated that was, but the fact that we're even talking about boarding someone in an ED for 6 months says a lot about how we coordinate, collaborate, and move people through the system. And so it's time to start talking to each other and figuring out ways to move beyond that.
Right. So the other thing that we're seeing an impact nationwide is the big beautiful bill. And some of the implications are starting to roll out. We've heard some things, and then you've heard some really wild things about. We talked about this in depth on the Texas episode about how they were all excited about this amount of money while they're going to be losing that amount of money, which was a lot bigger. So, what are you seeing as you're starting to see this? And this is, again, not a blue state, red state. This is everybody. What are you seeing as you're hearing as you travel? Where is this thing going?
Well, B3, we're going to know a lot no more by January 1,
Mm-hmm.
2026, right? Because we're going
Mm-hmm.
to hear how that other half of the money is going to get
Oh,
distributed to
yeah, that's right.
states. In those application processes, we've seen the applications in a lot of those states. Some of those applications spoke more to behavioral health than others. Some of those states really leaned into behavioral health and supporting behavioral health integration into healthcare. Some of the states were scared to talk about it in their applications. I
Yep.
know I won't call out a state, but maybe we live there. Um, it,
Maybe.
it was interesting how painfully it was left out of certain sections.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, but it's there. It exists. It'll be interesting to see how
Mm,
meaningful that is. And so I think as we see that start to roll out, as we see the real impacts of Medicaid, what restrictions continue as part of Medicare, we really don't know.
right.
All of those things are gonna have significant impacts on how care is delivered and who has access to care because there's
Yeah.
going to be so many more folks who are uninsured. And historically, a lot of these community-based providers want to serve everyone.
Yeah.
I don't know how that's possible in the
Right.
current environment financially. I mean, we should
Right.
want to serve
I hear you.
everyone,
I hear you.
but financially, not
How?
viable.
Yeah. Right. So you were mentioning a while ago about hospitals not necessarily even knowing CEOs and partnering. So what are you seeing hospitals do? So they don't know anybody in the community. They've not met the CEOs. So what do they do instead, Jason?
They see a gap and they form their own program, Renee.
Oh, of course
Um,
they do.
they see a gap, they're like, well, if our docs need to refer someone to a therapist, then we're just going to hire a therapist and put a sign on the door that says therapy, problem solved, right? Well, No, but that's what we see all the time. We see small hospitals hiring a social worker, hiring a therapist, and then they check the box. Well, now we can make a referral. Well, it doesn't actually meet the need,
No,
because
no,
especially when we're thinking about a chronic population, and trying to keep people closer to home, there's still a missing part of that continuum of care. And so we spend a lot of
no.
times
And
talking about continuum of cares and gaps in the continuum of care.
right. And then a lot of times those are like the 9 to 5, Monday through Friday hospital
Of course.
employee, which that is not at all what fills a gap because it's the people that show up after hours who might have been working all day
Right.
or, crisis on the weekend. Those are the folks that need the help. So bringing your own 9 to 5 employee in for a couple reasons, right? We remember that one organization you talked to where they had two child psychologists and not enough work for them. So then
Right.
they've brought them internal, won't let them do telehealth, but now they can't pay for them because they don't have enough
Right.
billable hours because in small areas you don't have enough
Right.
population to pull that off, right? So there's that issue on that side. So there's not enough billable hours to maintain them at a hospital. And then they're not the expertise we just talked about. They don't have the specific expertise somebody needs. So they're kind of become this general know all things that it's like inch deep and it doesn't really get you anything,
And we've yet to be in a state that doesn't have fragmented mobile crisis. I
right?
mean, every time I have to dive in, so we're doing a lot of work in different states that we interact with mobile crisis responders. And I wish I could say I've been to a state where it's working. I've yet to find a state, and we went to a quarter of the states in the United States, right? This last year. In that
Right.
quarter, in that representational 25%, nothing. I have yet to hear firsthand anyone express to me that mobile crisis works consistently across rural communities.
Right. Right. And part of that is the way this whole thing rolled out. It was everybody got to do whatever they wanted to do to build it originally. And then this federal mandate came down without funding to actually implement, without really thinking about rural. They really kind of did it for the bigger
Well,
populations.
and here's the next theme. We didn't even talk about CCBHCs don't necessarily fix it all.
No,
The
gosh, no.
CCBHC model is a great model, but it doesn't necessarily fix all of these structural issues that have
No,
been built in communities that are within the funding structures today. It doesn't fix it. It's not a panacea to come in and fix all of that.
no. And so the last thing we wanted to bring up, you were talking about again hospitals and them not even knowing the CEOs in the community. But what are you when you're talking to leadership? What what is it consistently that you're seeing over and over and over again when they bring you in the room?
It's a lack of program insight. And so let's just kind of break this down for a minute, right? Because we'll go and talk to someone and they'll tell us one thing about how wonderful they are, all the programs they do, what they do in the community, and it sounds great, right?
Sounds great.
But then I walk out of there and I go next door to a complementary organization that fits another part of the continuum of care,
Right.
and they tell me they never talked to that provider. And so, how can care be delivered so seamlessly and transition so smooth if the two major providers in the community tell me they don't talk to each other and they don't even know what's happening with their patients go through the doors across the street? It makes me question everything sometimes because I want to believe what they told me. And I don't think they were lying to me. I just really think so many of these community-based providers and small hospitals have their blinders on and they
Yeah.
lack the ability to look in the mirror honestly and say, you know what, I can't be everything. And I'm going to need to create new partnerships to deliver better care to my community.
I mean, do they really think that they're the only place a person goes? I mean, is that the mindset? Is like everybody comes to us for all things and they have no idea that people have specialists outside?
We love to stay within our silo. We
Yeah.
love to build our buildings and stay within our,
Yes.
we talk about buildings a lot, right? Like
Buildings,
people
buildings,
want to show you their buildings.
building.
We go to hospitals are especially notorious for this. They've got a plan in 2028. We're redoing the ED and we're going to build this many more rooms on. We'll have this many safe rooms. And it's all about what happens within those walls. We don't think about the patient experience throughout the entire system. And that's
No,
unfortunate.
which we don't have here, but this is why we have some of the conversations we do with some of the architects that we do,
Right.
is because exactly that, right? They're building on the rooms, maybe the safe room or whatever, with no thoughts of how people with behavioral health needs actually need those spaces. So then you get spaces with water features and rocks at the crisis center that when the first sheriff drops somebody off, they pick up a rock and whack
Well,
somebody with it. I mean, it's
in
just
the
like
last couple of months, you could
design.
read the story of the University of Iowa that left someone who was psychotic on a gurney in a hallway when they're
Oops,
actively psychotic and has permanent brain damage now. I mean, we see these stories all of the
oops.
time that there's horrible consequences for not taking care of people in an appropriate way.
Oh, yeah. We talked about the one where the sheriffs looked for somebody for 48 hours, finally found them,
Right,
brought them to the hospital. Hospital let them walk out the door and didn't even watch which direction they walked
right,
away. So then the sheriff's deputies are
right,
out chasing them again, trying to find him again because it was
right.
a health reason they were looking for him in the
And
first place. I mean, insanity. And it's in every small community in every state across our country. And people pretend like they're not violating laws doing that. It's insane, but we hear it all the time. So those are some of the themes. So now let's talk about some of the surprises and the challenges we ran into, and I'll go first. So I was supposed to speak in Montana, and I was supposed to go, but I decided wrongly to wait an extra day because I thought, I can work another day and then I'll get up there in time. No, I did not. No, I did not. And for the first time in my life, not only did I not make it to the state I was going to, I was dropped off 2 states away. I
yep,
was dropped off in Washington State in Spokane. And I was not going to Spokane, so I did not look up at all Spokane, but I got a text out mid-flight. It was just a mess, the whole thing. And they wouldn't let us go back to where we came from in Denver, so I got dropped off in a whole new state. So Brent was in Montana, had to come get me 5 hours away, the opposite direction of where he was trying to pick me up, so that I
yep.
could get home. And I got to fly home
Don't
from
worry.
Montana.
I took care of the conference.
Thank
I
you.
took
I
care of the
appreciate that.
keynote.
Never made it.
I did it all
Sure, that was a
myself.
good story. You're like, she would be here, but she's not here. It was
Yeah.
a wild. So that was one of my wildest, I mean, ever. And I've traveled a lot and I've been left places and missed flights, different things, but never dropped off in 2 states away. That's just never happened. So that was just totally bizarre. So that was my top of my 2025. So what about you, Jason? You've been all
Well,
over the place. What are
it
some of the
was
weird things that
hard to
happened this year?
narrow it down, but we do a lot of spontaneous things when
Yeah.
we're on the road. And
Yeah.
so probably the spontaneous thing I think about that was the most ridiculous was Brett and I were in Flagstaff presenting at a conference, and we had a Jeep, and so we popped the top off the Jeep after the conference was done at 5 because we're like, if we drive fast, we can make it to the Grand Canyon and get one picture, right?
If you go fast,
And so we pop the top because, if you can pop the top off the Jeep, why wouldn't you pop the top off the Jeep?
why not?
And we drive to the Grand Canyon, which was directly into one of the only rainstorms that happens all year because it doesn't rain a lot in the
Yep.
desert. But when it does rain, it does really rain. And so we had to stop and put the top back on in the rain. And then we ended up getting our picture at the Grand Canyon in the rain, wind and rain.
Nice.
Good news was we got the first parking spot in the parking lot because
Of course you did.
there was nobody at the Grand Canyon, or not a soul.
You
Like
had
it
the
was a
whole place to
ghost
yourself.
town. So we
Awesome.
we had our run of the Grand Canyon. Of course, we were soaking wet, and an hour and a half away from the hotel. But
I
that
like it
that
so much.
was one of the best
Yep.
ridiculous things we did on the road.
Well, I think my ridiculous one, I got to go with you to Anchorage, and I
Yeah.
wouldn't have missed that trip for anything. But I recall that you and I went out to the quote wilderness to do some hiking. We were going to go see
Yep.
moose. We were all about it. And we were getting home dejected because we hadn't seen any moose in the
Nothing.
wild. But no fear. It was 2 blocks away from our Airbnb in somebody's yard eating all their houseplants. So,
Downtown Anchorage. Like you could see the high
downtown.
buildings of Anchorage, and there's the moose.
There he
Um,
was. And so
so
that I made my whole I
yeah,
another made that was a positive made my year. I always wanted to see a moose. I always expected it to be like out on the in the hills and in the mountains, but no, he was eating somebody's flower bed, which made me laugh. So it was really
yep.
cool. Got to see some wildlife. I enjoyed it a lot, but yeah, I still have that picture prominently in my head. And we complain about deer in Iowa. I got nothing on those guys. Those guys are
No,
eating everything. It's
unbelievable.
crazy. You wouldn't have green anything in Anchorage, I don't think.
No,
All right, you have
absolutely
any
not.
others that you're thinking about?
Well, I do think about the most inappropriate thing I did this year, and it's inappropriate, but I still share it.
But it was
Um,
appropriate. They made it on the calendar, so you didn't just make it up,
no, and there were signs. It was hosted
right?
by a sponsor. It was actually a hosted event by a hospital
There you go. So
association
you did a
and a
appropriate event.
sponsor that had a sponsorship, and it was a beer and donut run around the hotel pool, which was under the Bat Bridge. If you're familiar with Austin, the bats fly out at 8 o'clock every night when it gets dark.
Nice.
So we had all of this stuff going on at the same time of people shotgunning a beer, doing a lap, and then eating a donut and doing another lap. I can't believe it, but I got a medal, and so I don't know where my medal is right now, but I did medal because I get competitive. Um, it's true, and so I need to be careful what I compete in, I think is what I learned in this.
Oh my goodness. One day we really are going to put together the best and worst of conferences,
And
everyone. We've got,
there's videos, Renee. There is a video of that, and so I guess I can never run for public
oh,
office because that video would
oh,
surface.
in today's day and age, that's probably nothing compared to
That's
what other
true. That
people
would
got on
be
them. So you're good to go. You're good to go. All right, everybody. Before we wrap up, I want to give you the recovering politician self-care policy of the week. It's the end of the year. That means it's time for goal setting for me. And I just want to remind everybody that does not mean make 5,200 goals to try to hit because you're going to quit by Quitter's Day, which is the third week of January. So I highly recommend you do what I do and you knock it down to 2 or 3 max for the first quarter. And one of those is work related, and the other two are part of the rest of your life. So things like your health, your family, your hobbies, other things to make you a well-rounded individual, reading, mindfulness, spirituality, all the different things, whatever it is that's important to you, you got to like look at your whole life to get your whole life in balance. If you have every goal in your life about work, you're not going to be in balance with your family, your friends, and other things. You might not even have family or friends when you're done with that. And so you've got to really be thinking about, what do you want to accomplish in 2026? And I know we haven't talked about this yet. We probably should on the podcast about what the goals are for Real Policy Partners. But Jason, you have any thoughts? I know you guys are going to be doing some goal setting coming up. When you hit so many states this year, is there a goal to keep going and hit other states next year? Or are you scaling back thinking some of these really weren't the ones I wanted to go to and we're going to do fewer? What are you thinking for goals for next year?
well, we're actually just in the middle of that process right now. And I think the key is that sometimes you need a third party, right? You need a coach to help you
Yeah.
with this. And so I'm the
Yeah.
biggest advocate of,
Yeah.
we have someone who coaches us and helps us to set our goals, holds us accountable, and we check in about that. And, there was a time during this year that I didn't think we are going to reach our goals, right? As we looked at 2025, it was kind of slow the first 6 months of 2025.
Yeah.
And then we got some big contracts, and like a lot of these conferences happened in quarter 3 and 4.
Yeah.
Um, and so things really picked up, and we ended up coming back. And I think we've made almost all of our goals, right? We're going to do
That's
a
cool.
look back here really soon. And I think that it's really exciting because we still kept focused on that we're still going to make our goals. We
Hmm.
never gave up. And I think that's the big thing, right? Set goals, set realistic goals. But just because things start to fall behind, if you fall behind a little bit, it's okay.
Hmm.
Keep focused and keep moving forward. I think that's where people get stuck and then they're like, I
Hmm.
just give up. You got to keep gritty in order to get through. And that's one of the things that's tough about being an entrepreneur and having a small business is
Yeah.
because things swing a lot sometimes and you got to
Yeah.
be prepared for that.
Right. You got to set your goal and your intention because the strategy itself can change. So, like in
Oh,
your case, you wanted consistent work all year long to hit financial goals and things. That just didn't happen in 2025 because of government, everything.
no, we
And
caught
so,
up. It happened in the last month.
exactly. That's what I'm saying. So, you still hit the goal and your
Yeah.
intention was X, but the how you got there is definitely not the way we picked it last
I
year.
was
It's just
broke for 3 months in the middle, but it's okay. It all worked out.
because you went to Puerto Rico and don't even get me started on new
Already
grain
booked.
bins.
Already
Don't talk
booked for
about it,
this
people.
March for 2026. So
Don't keep, he
all's
just needs to
good.
figure out how to keep cash flow, folks.
Made
Don't
my
worry about
personal
Jason.
goal.
He's
Made my
just
personal goal. Family
fine.
with Puerto Rico, Renee.
He's
That's part of
just fine,
planning.
people. He's just whining, doing the farmer thing. Well, today, everybody, we wrapped up talking about how we did in 2025, 14 states, lots of rural health conferences, talking to lots of CEOs at hospitals, getting people connected for behavioral health. There's some great programs out there. We talked about in the middle about some of the things that you could see that might be coming your way. And then there's some challenges that are the same everywhere we go. And so you got to talk to people. You got to know who's in your community. You've got to do that. And if you don't know how to do that, reach out. Folks like us can help you connect to the people that you need to connect to so that you know how to make the best system for what works for you because it's only going to be the way works in your community. You can't take a box and just plug it in. It doesn't work like that. But before we go, don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube. If you leave us a positive review, we send you a prize. Thanks, everybody. Happy 2025. Welcome 2026. Bye, all.